This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here live each and every Sunday on BizTalk Radio, talking about innovation, creativity, and design. And we're pretty open to a pretty broad definition of that. A lot of people kind of pigeonhole me as being a tech guy, given my history as CTO at Hewlett-Packard. But a lot of people don't even know in my background that I actually started off, my original career in college was as an architecture major. So I tend to be a little bit more visual than the traditional CTOs that are out there. So just back from Consumer Electronics Show. So down there for the show this year for 2017. Nothing like going to an event where you hang out with 178,000 of your nearest and dearest friends. And it's basically one big geek party for 4 days. A lot of very interesting things going on at CES this year. And a future show, I'll actually probably talk more about that. In fact, I'll probably invite Kim McNicholas back on the show. She was there also doing some events with the Extreme Tech Challenge for Richard Branson. Kim runs that for Richard, and they always announce the three winners. They get to go spend a week at Necker Island with Richard Branson and Tim Ferriss and crew. So no, and I have never been invited yet to Necker Island. I get to be the cheering squad on the side, but I never have gotten the invite. So we always have Kim on the show afterwards because she has some great Necker Island stories about hanging out with Richard and Tim and Scoble and all the bigwigs in the blogosphere. So we'll do that in a future show. We'll talk more about what's going on in the consumer electronics space and CES and some of the new technologies and trends. There are some videos that I did. Last week's show, I shared the 6 innovations that I'm most excited about, so you want to go check out last week's show. We actually posted the video in the show notes, so you can watch the show. And there's actually, we had visuals, we had show and tell here in the studio last week, so you can actually see the technologies and innovations that I was talking about. And so check that out. There's also a video that I do that's a prediction video that's up on YouTube where I kind of predict what the hot things are going to be at CES. And I record that prior to CES, so you can watch that video, then you can read all about CES, and you can tell, you can give me a score at how well I did at predicting what was going to be the hot thing at CES. So let's get right in to today's show. We have a special guest. This actual guest is one that I've been working with regards to my day job as a CEO. This particular guest has been involved with supporting and providing some assistance around the innovation boot camps. I used to teach those boot camps when I was at HP. We now do those boot camps as part of the industry that I'm involved in, which is the cable industry. And this particular guest has been one that has been involved in that. So I want to welcome onto the show today is Anna Akbari. Anna is one that actually I met through the whole process of the work in helping on the boot camp, and now she has a new book that's actually just now coming out. So we're going to talk more about that. But Anna also has a unique background and a little bit of a different perspective, having kind of self-dissected her whole experience of graduating in the job market and hitting, probably having one of the worst timings of when you finish your PhD to then decide to go into the job market. Anna, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, yeah, you and I had met, through your help on the boot camps running the pitch night events. So during the boot camp, we actually host a pitch night. So people in the boot camp can kind of see both good pitches and really horrible bad pitches. So you kind of get both ends of the spectrums of how to pitch your idea and actually how not to pitch your idea. And we've had some real doozies, albeit you were not involved in the pitch night for the very first boot camp, were you?
No, but I did hear tales. Didn't have all the stage.
It is an absolute classic. We had one guy fell right off the stage into the lap of the audience. We had another guy it was a security product. And then, basically he could tell that the audience just didn't get it. And I come from a biometric security background, right? I used to do work for the NSA. I couldn't get it. And then he basically stormed off the stage yelling at everybody. So it was definitely, in fact, it's the one we all talk about all the time, which is how not to do a pitch. So Hannah, before we do, we're gonna go down a lot of rabbit holes. That's just the way this show goes.
That's
so
okay.
this is just just you and I having a great conversation. So, but share with our audience a little bit about your background. You have a PhD, but I never call you doctor. I don't It's
That's okay.
But give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I'm a sociologist, and I taught in New York for a long time at Parsons and NYU. And I taught at NYU in the Media Culture Communication Department. And I was dabbling in the startup scene there, and then came out to Silicon Valley several years ago and have been working with startups and with larger corporations in the innovation space there. And now I have my new book, Start Up Your Life, Hustle and Hack Your Way to Happiness, which looks at how whether you're an entrepreneur or someone who works at a large organization, how you can apply startup principles to your personal life to be happier and more successful. Yeah,
we're going to get into that. If you look at some of the chapter titles, they're pretty humorous or pretty scary, depending on where you are in your career, on how you're going to look at some of these chapters. So let's back up. Where did you grow up at?
I grew up in the Midwest in Iowa.
Iowa. See, I was Cincinnati, then Chicago. So we're both Midwesterners. I knew there was some kinship there.
Yeah, yep, Midwest. My mom worked at the University of Northern Iowa for a long time. That's near where I grew up. In case they sometimes do well in basketball and are kind of on the radar from a sports perspective.
So was your mom then your inspiration to go into academia then?
Well, I mean, I definitely grew up on a university campus, and for some reason, I always thought I was going to get a PhD from the time I was very young, but I just didn't know in what. And then after college, I went to school I finished high school in, oh my goodness, my daughters. I finished high school. I'm moving while I'm talking to you here. I finished high school
don't worry about it, Anna. You're just live on Facebook Live here, so everybody's watching you move your MacBook around. You want that. I see you want that picture in the background, so you get the nicer view there.
Well, it's funny, you said you majored in architecture. This house is designed and decorated by an architect, so you can appreciate it.
It's all about presentations. You ever see these designers where they got to stage everything just to look?
Yeah, totally. So anyway, after Iowa, I actually finished high school in Michigan at Interlochen, which is a performing arts high school. I was a theater major there. And
where's Interlochen at?
Very north.
Oh, okay.
So, Traverse City, which is up really.
Well, my wife and I met in Benton Harbor. St. Joseph. So Michigan has a dear place in our heart. So
yeah, I love Michigan. And then I moved to New York, and after going to college in New York, I was in the Peace Corps, and then came back to New York and started pursuing my PhD then.
And then did you start your PhD focused on sociology, or were you looking around still?
Yeah, I took a bit of a roundabout path to getting there. I did a master's first in liberal studies, which is essentially a nonfiction writing focused program that does a lot of different cultural criticism. But I was doing ethnographic work and research for my thesis for that. And then from there, I went on to essentially complete another master's in sociology, qualify for the PhD, and then do that.
And you did it all at one school, or did you?
I did all of that at the new school. My undergrad was at NYU, and grad school was at the new school.
Oh, okay. Sounds like my kids. Try a couple degrees, figure it out. So but then as I kind of teased it up, we'll talk about it. We'll get into this more in the next segment because we're going to come up here on a commercial break here in a little bit. But then you were graduating right into the teeth of the 2007, 2008 economic downturn. And I know in your book you mentioned the fact about, why would you have to worry about what's happening on Wall Street? Why would that impact you? So we'll come back to that. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up our conversation with Anna and talk more about her background, her role as far as driving helping corporations and innovation in Silicon Valley, and her new book. So stay right there. We're going to be right back here at Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here with Anna Akbari. Anna and I, as I said in the first segment, have known each other for the last couple of years. She's been part of the team that helps with the innovation boot camps that we teach, the ones in Silicon Valley. And we teach that boot camp course a couple times a year. It is part of my day job, but we do open that course to the public every once in a while, so you can check that out. We put out at social medias when the registration opens and that, so just go over and follow us on Facebook or follow me on Twitter, and you'll get the notifications when the next boot camp course comes up, and we'll go from there. So Anna, we were talking in the last segment about kind of your career, Iowa, and working through your degree programs and that, and then you decided to graduate at probably the worst economic downturn cycle that any of us have seen in an incredibly long time. So
in our lifetimes, anyway. Yeah.
Well, in your lifetime is much shorter than mine. We won't get into the age conversation, but I had a few downturns. 70s weren't all that great in the oil crises. I lived through that as a kid. So, but look, my kids are 32, 30, and 28. Right. Mm-hmm. And so they were kind of hitting into that, some of them, I have two with master's degrees, one with a bachelor's, and they kind of hit into that same down cycle. Man, it can be really crushing for self-doubt.
Well, and, as we learned, every industry was affected by it. It wasn't just Wall Street. I mean, there was such a ripple effect. And so, a lot of companies were laying off and then just shifting to sort of a freelance model, and academia was doing the same thing, really not opening up a lot of new tenure track positions and shifting more to an adjunct model. And so it was difficult, especially at the time, living in a city like New York that was so expensive. Was really, everyone was struggling. In fact, there was a time when I knew more people that were unemployed than employed.
It is startling, right? Because there's been kind of this mantra that says, work hard, do your study and get good grades, get a degree, get a job, and then all of a sudden, it's kind of this expectation of, hey, I've done everything that I'm supposed to be doing. Why isn't there something at the other end for me? Yeah,
when you tick all the boxes and you followed the straight path, you think that there's going to be this guaranteed reward. And, this really made everyone realize that even if you have the quote unquote secure job, you're not really safe.
Right.
No one was safe. It's an illusion. Like in Silicon Valley, we don't necessarily have an illusion of safety, but in other industries and in other locations, there's a feeling of course I'm going to have this job. Nothing's going to happen. And I think that really was a wake-up call to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I think there is this kind of different attitude in Silicon Valley about, it's kind of almost the reverse of everywhere else in the world, right? If you're in New York or Washington D.C., Atlanta, and you're applying for a job and you show a new job every year or every 2 years, then it's viewed as a negative.
Right.
In Silicon Valley, if your resume shows that you've been at the same place for 3 or 4 years, then you get viewed as not being aggressive enough.
Right.
You're not trying. Why? Yeah. You're trying to coast. You're trying for the easy way out. You just get someplace and park. And it's almost like the exact opposite culture from other parts of the world.
And in some ways, when I arrived there, I found it so refreshing because I find that in Silicon Valley, if you haven't been doing one thing in one industry for the last decade or two, they don't mind. They look and see the diversity of your resume and they say, oh, okay, you've done this, and clearly you're a smart person. And so I could see you doing this. There's a sort of creativity, I think, around the hiring process, which I personally found very refreshing compared to other cities that are far more siloed in different industries.
Yeah, I think, there's two ends of the spectrum, right? There's the end of the spectrum that says, I want somebody that's got, 20 years experience in something before I'm going to risk anything.
Yeah.
But then you've also got Silicon Valley that almost swings the pendulum the other way around. In fact, I was having a conversation last night with somebody, and they were sharing with me about a company that they were part of a pitch event that this company pitched to them. And this company happens to be in an area where it's highly regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, right? And so you have, the complexities of doing Food and Drug Administration certification of this particular product, right? And what this company had done is they had nobody over the age of 30. And in fact, their head of FDA compliance and certification was 24 years old and had never worked in FDA compliance certification at all.
Wow.
And I'm like, how's that going to work? You know? And it turns out they've been 5 years trying to get FDA compliance and they still haven't gotten it. And I was like, I think I could put my finger on your problem.
Yeah, right.
A few gray hairs around the building may not be a bad idea. You do need a little adult supervision every once in a while.
Absolutely. I mean, look, there's something to be said for experience. What I just kind of appreciate that they can see how someone could slide into a role that maybe they hadn't been doing in that exact form.
Exactly. And I think what the Valley also recognizes is the really good companies and the really good managers don't give a rip about what your degree is in, right? It's more about you as a personality and your skills and your abilities and how does it match to the function and job, right? Look, I've got a guy who is PhD, runs the Advanced Technology Group, where I'm the CEO today, right? His PhD is in geology, but it's not because of his geology degree, but through his educational process, he's learned how to think, how to problem solve, how to be creative, those kinds of, so the degree is whatever you're interested in. It's those other things that wrap around it that then make you valuable for the positions that you can match into.
Well, and that's the value, I think, of a liberal arts education is that, if you are learning to articulate yourself orally and through the written word, if you're learning how to do research, you become a thinking person and you can contribute in so many different areas.
Yeah, I think there should be some basic requirement on being able to read, write, and speak. Yeah. It's not a universal skill.
It is not. You're right.
Look, you've been involved with our work in the boot camp, with the pitch nights, right?
Yeah.
We've seen some pretty interesting pitches, it's kind of like, wow, where did that come from, and.
Well, and sometimes I think that gets into the realm of sort of lacking in self-awareness also.
Yeah, I agree. So we're going to take another really quick commercial break here. When we come back, we're going to pick up our conversation. We're going to talk about Anna's book here, Start Up Your Life, Hustle, and Hack Your Way to Happiness. So you're wanting to stay here as we just start diving into the book. We're going to be right back after this quick commercial break. Hop on over to Facebook Live. You can send us questions, and we'll answer those during the commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
Biz Talk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Before we hop back into this segment, I want to recognize the sponsor for this week's show, which is Zoom. Zoom has been a long-time technology sponsor for the show. They've given us access to their technology. We've been using it for the last year. It's how our guests, such as Anna today, joins in. But even on my day job, we've adopted Zoom and we've replaced all of the other variations of video conferencing. And I spend literally most of my time on Zoom talking with my team around the world. Why is that? Because Zoom just is, the video quality and the audio quality is just unbelievable, particularly even when I'm in China or I'm in Europe and using Zoom to get back to the US or talking to the rest of my team. Like I said, I've been using this for the last year and it has been, just a lifesaver. And so therefore I'm a huge fan. I'm a user of it, which is why I even agreed to allow Zoom to be a sponsor of the show. And it's not just me that thinks it's great. Gartner just recently rated it up as a new leader in its Magic Quadrant. And the reason why I like it, and I think the reason why also Gartner likes it, is it's the first video conferencing system that doesn't suck. So give it a try with a free account. Allows you to get up to 50 video users on at the same time. So you could invite all your friends and family and have a 50-person chat at the same time. Hop on over to killerinnovations.com/Zoom to find out more about how to get that free account and try it out. Trust me, you won't regret it. So Anna, we were talking before about, actually we got some great questions during the commercial break. One on, the role of startup principles in agile software development, how it applies to the future of high school. And I think that ties great into your book. So, here's the book. So everybody can see the cover. Start Up Your Life, Hustle and Hack Your Way to Happiness. What I love is when I looked at the your table of contents, it actually had me laughing because it's like everything else. You learn this when I was authoring my book, which was I spent there's a horror story about the title on my book. I went through 9 titles before everybody agreed that it was the right title. What's that?
It takes a while to find the right one.
Oh, it does. It is painful. But then I was reading the titles to your chapters. I love the one which is chapter number 10, which is Belly Flop with Grace.
Yeah.
The art of failure. And it gives you a visual image of, just doing a face plant when you try to do something. So
which we've all done. So.
And if you're going to play in the innovation game, you better get used to it. Because if it's not happening on a daily basis, you're doing something wrong.
Well, I don't know if it still exists, but Silicon Valley had FailCon for a while.
Yeah, actually, FailCon's been going on for quite some time. And it's basically, you think of it as the reverse TED Talk. Rather than you go talking about how great your project was, you want to have the biggest blowout failure, and you stand up in front of this audience. You get I don't know how many minutes to talk, and you get to open the kimono and really and actually the best speakers are the ones that have the worst failures. So it's kind of this reverse reward mechanism, which actually it's actually a good thing, right? Because it's even today, even in businesses, even in Silicon Valley, there's some companies that have a culture that are just really anti-failure. So let's talk about your book. So you graduated in 2008. You are out there, trying to do the job thing, recognizing that your assumptions on what the path forward was going to be, and then applying. You basically reverse hacked the whole startup mentality and applied it to your own personal life and your own career. So talk about how the book came about and give us some insight into the book.
Yeah, I think that for many of us, that time between it's applicable to people at many different stages, but I think we feel it most acutely at that time after we graduate, whether it's undergrad or grad school, and when we're sort of settling into our adult lives, right, where we have a steady job and we have a clearer career path. We maybe start a family or get married, you buy a house or whatever it is that's like your metric for growing up. There's this gap where you're sort of figuring it all out, and it's kind of messy. And I think too often we live for milestones. We think, okay, well, I'm going to be happy when I graduate. I'm going to be happy when I meet or marry the mate of my dreams. I'm going to be happy when I get this huge promotion. But then what about the other 99% of the time? You know, life is the other stuff. And when we get those milestones, we do experience a spike in our happiness, but we come back down almost immediately. It's the whole win the lottery phenomenon,
yep.
Which does not sustain happiness. And the same is true for tragedy. You could experience some terrible physical tragedy and you can actually rebound from that and even be happier depending on how you process this stuff. And so I started using a lot of the same principles that has made Silicon Valley so successful and applying that to, how I took vacation, for instance. These are small things that you can do. So for instance, I started doing home exchange. I sort of hacked the system. I was like, I can't afford to go on vacation, but I really need to get out of New York City. So what can I do? I had this apartment. It was tiny, but charming in Manhattan. Because they're all charming.
They're all charming. When someone, it's like watching an Airbnb. When someone says charming on Airbnb,
yeah,
it's code for don't bring more than one suitcase.
Yeah, right. It's like a shabby chic kind of thing. And, suddenly I was like, I have this great resource that I'm not tapping into. And if I can get from A to B, once I get there, I can have a beautiful house, a huge house, and they leave me their car. And, I can feel like an adult for a while. So, little hacks like that, or, monitoring what you're eating or how you're self-presenting and experimenting with that and getting real feedback from your audience and then integrating it. And that's, that's something that startups do all the time because they don't know, they can't plan. They can really just experiment.
Right.
And the more you try to pigeonhole where you're going into one particular thing, the more likely you are to fail and to be derailed when ultimately everything doesn't pan out the way you're hoping.
Well, exactly. I mean, people who've got a plan for their career and then they just stick to the one plan, not willing to let go and pivot when things just happen that are outside their control or even inside their control. But they just go to their grave with a plan, always trying to achieve the original plan and therefore live a long and miserable life because life doesn't work to a plan.
No, and then they lose sight of why they're even doing that in the first place because it's not making them happy, and other people might not be responding to it either. We're more likely to stay in a bad relationship or a job that we hate simply because of the fear of the unknown of what might come next. We're comfortable and complacent in being miserable more than we're motivated to move towards something that might be really great.
So in early on in the book, you talk about, the MVP. Now in the startup world, it's the minimum viable product. So in my personal life, what do you mean by an MVP?
Well, essentially, I think as we get older, our lives become layered with a lot of shoulds and a lot of, what I describe in the book as these sort of mental models that construct the way we think we're supposed to behave or quote unquote wisdom to guide us, which often isn't that conventional wisdom that isn't so wise. And as that layers on, we lose sight and lose touch with what is really important to us. And that's why I suggest to people to create a mantra. They don't have to share it with anyone, but a mantra as sort of your guiding principles. That's what you use to come back to your core. And that's how you decide to make different decisions and guide your behaviors moving forward. Because if you don't have that, then it's too easy to just do what everyone else seems to be telling you to do, and you aren't in touch with what actually makes you happy.
Yeah, and I think it is. I think we all kind of lose ourselves, right? Whether we get into the job and we turn into the work, the unbelievable workaholics, which I will admit I fell into that trap my first round in Silicon Valley in the early 80s. And I actually had to get out of the valley to break myself of that, because I could just see myself just, getting myself spiraling. Then when I came back the second time, 23 years later, you come back with a little bit more wisdom. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to pick up our conversation with Anna. And Anna, next when we come back, I'm going to ask you to share 2 pieces of advice that you would give people to just apply, that they can walk away with in their own lives, just to think differently about their own lives. Yep. So we come back, we're going to pick up where we're having this conversation with Anna about her book, Start Up Your Life. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are continuing our conversation with Anna Akbari, whose new book just came out at the end of December. It's titled Start Up Your Life, Hustle and Hack Your Way to Happiness. So, Anna, as we were going to the commercial break, I asked you to think about, great book. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
What 2 pieces of advice would you share with our listeners that you would pick out of the book as being something that they could run with?
Well, it's hard to choose just 2, but
as said by all famous authors when they're asked this question.
two things that maybe you haven't been given as advice in this particular form is, one, I talk about the importance of having life VCs. In Silicon Valley, people are always raising money from venture capitalists. And I often used to think, oh, I wish I had a life sponsor. I need a VC for my life, right? And I realized I already had many of them. They just look a little different than your average venture capitalist. And what I mean by life VCs and investing in life VCs is really taking the time to create mutually beneficial relationships, deep relationships that fluctuate in terms of what you're delivering and what the reciprocity is. But where, over the arc of your relationship with this person, maybe they're mentoring you, maybe you're bringing new ideas to them, maybe they're making introductions for you. You just never know where your network is going to lead you. And I think too often we now think of our network in terms of just, oh, I connected with them on LinkedIn, I can check that box, and then someday in the future I can call on them for a favor. Whereas really it's about that ongoing relationship. So investing in life VCs, I think, is really important.
So how's a life VC different than what people would traditionally call a coach or a mentor?
Because I don't think it's that official. And I think it can come in the form of people that are just your friends or even your acquaintances, that you aren't actually hiring or you aren't formally saying, I want to be mentored. It can take on a very non-traditional role. And that's why it's great because you can have such an abundance of them, and it's free. What the currency is, okay, now let's see, how could I enrich your life in some way? Right.
That's just a life VC. Great piece of advice. So what's the second one?
The second one is to make time for play so that you can have a little magic in your life. And when you're off duty from productivity, that's when many people will say that they have their best ideas and they realize things about themselves, what matters to them. And yet it's easy for play to fall completely off of our to-do list as adults. And so creating a space for that, a dedicated space and time for that, I think is really important.
Yes, I would agree wholeheartedly. Some of us just get so deep, and then you recognize that later on in life that you missed out on those opportunities, and play becomes just an important part of refresh, right?
Well,
otherwise it's just brain strain the entire time.
If you want to be productive, you need to have those definite breaks from productivity, because it actually makes you work more efficiently when you come back to the work.
So Anna, you've got your book coming out. Where can people find the book?
They can find it in all major bookstores. So Barnes & Noble, your local bookstores. You can find it on Amazon. And if you commute or, like to listen to something while you're cooking, you can get the audiobook, which I narrate.
You narrate your own book?
I did.
Okay. Now, all my listeners are going to send me nasty emails because Hyperion would not let me do my own book. Now, I've been doing the show for 12 years. The podcast actually led to my book, Beyond the Obvious. When I did my book deal with Hyperion, they would not let me do my own book. And fans of the show bought the audio book expecting to hear me, and it's not me. Now, the guy who did my book, Porter, great guy. He does James Patterson books, he's great voice, great guy. But I got hate mail. And everybody was screaming and yelling that I need to re-record my audiobook in my own voice because they're so used to hearing me every week in this case.
Sure.
So so people want to track what you're doing. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
You can find me on social media, or you can go to my website. So if you go to AnnaAkbari.com, you can find out more about the book. And I've also created a video series that accompanies the book, which you can take on your own. It's an online video course to go a little bit deeper into some of the recommendations, and that's all available at startupyour.life.
Okay, and we'll have all the links on that over at Kill Innovation, so it'll make it easy for you to find it. Anna, I want to thank you for your time for joining the show today. As we wrap up the show here, I just want to wrap up and share with you just an update on what's coming up for the celebration of the 13th anniversary of Kill Innovations. We've got the contest running. So the contest is go out to social media, like me over on Facebook, like me over on Twitter, over on Instagram, wherever, and then post the innovation that you believe you are most interested or most excited about. Use the hashtag Killer Innovation. First week of March, we will pick one of those postings over the next 2 months or so, and the winner gets to actually come on to Killer Innovations and therefore actually get to have 1 hour on the show. Talk about whatever you want. Your startup, your thing you're working on. You want to toss out an idea. We want to do a brainstorming live on the show. Your call. So March 5th, we will start season 13 for Killer Innovations. Yes, we've been doing this for 12 years. We'll be starting year number 13. I'm an old timer at this. But here's your opportunity to be able to talk about whatever it is in the innovation, creativity, design space that you're most interested in across the 35 stations that carry us live on Sunday, and then the thousands upon thousands of fans that take us on down as the podcast that goes out every Tuesday morning. So here's your shot to be able to tell your story and get whatever you're interested in out there and showing. So hop on over to killinnovations.com. Check out the show notes. We'll have all the links from our conversation with Anna. You can also get all of the show archive there. And, with that, we are going to say goodbye. We'll see you next Sunday right here on Kill Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
The opinions you hear on Biz Talk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, Biz Talk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on Biz Talk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about Biz Talk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com. Biz Talk Radio.
Autism. 1 out of every 68 children in America are impacted across every race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic group. If you aren't directly affected, someone you know is. Today's world doesn't support those on the autism spectrum. It needs hacking for us to truly welcome those who think and create differently than ourselves. We're Hacking Autism, a nonprofit charity with a mission to hack therapy, technologies, and career opportunities that improve the personal and professional lives of people on the autism spectrum. We believe that everyone can play a role in supporting those on the autism spectrum so that they can show their unique talents and abilities in this fast-paced world. You aren't powerless in this fight. Use your gifts and talents to make a positive impact. Join us in making a difference. Go to hackingautism.org to learn more.
Carpenters have their hammers and saws, chefs have their outfitted kitchens, and musicians have their instruments. A craftsman's ability to do their job is dependent on having the right tools. So where does an innovator, someone who takes an idea and makes it real, find the right tools to do their job? Outfit your innovator's garage by visiting innovation.tools. Innovation.tools is an online store created by innovators for innovators. It's where you will find tested and proven tools to help you create that next great product or service. These tools include books, audio training, video training, brainstorming how-tos, and much, much more. And for a limited time, listeners of Killer Innovations will get 25% off on your first order by using the discount code RADIO at checkout. And 100% of our profits from your purchases will be donated to charity. So go to innovation.tools and create that next great innovation.
Rwanda is a shining example of how the global community can come together and rebuild a country after a devastating genocide. But there is still more that needs to be done. In the rural villages, students are crowded into schools with no electricity, no running water, no internet access, and limited sanitation. Will these kids be ready to continue the rebuilding of Rwanda, or will they be dependent upon others? Through education and employment, boys and girls have an equally promising future that can transform their struggling communities. For $20 a month, a child can be educated and a community strengthened. By supporting Pioneer Education Africa, a 501c3 charity, you partner with others to provide education that will prepare a generation to take on the task of self-reliance. 100% of the proceeds received go directly to the education of the children. Visit pioneereducationafrica.com to find out more.